Imagine if a Shaolin monk started studying at a military academy. What would the other students' lives be like? That's exactly what happens in today's story. The story begins with a boy named Li, who was training in Kung Fu at a Shaolin monastery from birth. One day, he went to the monastery's temple to ask for forgiveness because what he was about to do might not be right. Suddenly, a warrior attacked him. The surprise attack caught Li off guard, but he managed to defend himself. The warrior threw him against a wall, but Li managed to recover. He struck the warrior mid-air and defeated him in just moments. Next came the turn for swordplay. Li showcased his skills and decisively defeated the warrior. Then he moved on to the third warrior, who was meditating. However, when the warrior sensed his approach, he threw his beads into the mirror, dazzling Li's eyes and causing him to fall to the ground. The warrior was about to win when Li slipped out and a fierce battle ensued. Ultimately, Li emerged victorious. He bowed his head in the temple and then left. The monastery teacher informed him that he had demonstrated the most skill in the exam and, therefore, would have the opportunity to attend a new school in the city. In the city, he would live with a family of 3, which included 2 children and their father. This man was a scientist who knew the monastery teacher. Li then set off for the new city. In the city school, there was a 15-year-old boy named Feng who was a taekwondo athlete. His younger sister, Shan, loved her brother dearly and managed the taekwondo club at school. She would point out Feng's flaws during his matches to help him improve. Lan's brother was a big eater who only thought about food. The 4 of them were good friends and lived close to each other. Their father, Do-han, worked hard and was focused on his job. His wife had passed away years ago, so he remained engrossed in work. Do-han was developing a special device that the city's gangsters had their eyes on. Do-han called his children, but Lan wasn't happy because her father rarely came home. The doctor promised to come home soon and asked them to open a gift he had sent. In reality, the box contained the very device the gangsters wanted to steal. At that moment, Li knocked on the door, and Lan let him in. She took him to show his room, but meanwhile, her father was captured by the thugs. The gang leader, Larry, threatened Do-han, demanding the special device from him. The doctor explained that there was no such device and that he was actually working on technology that would allow his children to communicate with a robot that spoke in their mother's voice. However, Larry didn't believe him. From the CCTV footage, Larry discovered that Slop and Fist were tasked with stealing the device. This was their first mission, so both were quite excited. They dressed in strange outfits and stood outside Lan's house. One of them decided to break into the house at night, but the other suggested that since the kids would be at school during the day, they could steal the device then. Inside the house, Li was adapting to the ways of the new city. He saw Lan watching a taekwondo match and found the sport intriguing. Later that night, while Li was meditating, a disagreement arose between him and Yu over a video game. But soon, the two started enjoying the game together. Meanwhile, Lan opened a gift box in her room and found a panda keychain inside. Little did she know, this panda was actually a pen drive that the thugs had been searching for. When Lan pressed the button, the panda asked her to set a password. Unknowingly, she said, "What password?" which ended up being the password. When she turned on the panda, she discovered that it contained her mother's voice, created using artificial intelligence. The next morning, Li, Yu, and Lan set off for their first day of school. The two thugs saw the kids leaving and decided it was time to execute their plan. One of them noticed Lan's panda keychain dangling from her bag. Now they planned to steal the device from Lan. On their way, Lan met Fan. At that moment, one of the thugs stealthily stole the panda keychain and ran off. But Li spotted him and, with lightning speed, caught the thug. Just then, Fan arrived to help Li out. The two of them gave the thug a good beating, but he still wasn't ready to give up. He tried to steal the panda again and managed to escape. However, this time the friends teamed up, caught him and tossed him into a trash can, causing him to roll down the street. At school, the kids in Li's class were astonished to see a Shaolin warrior. They started asking him bizarre questions like, "Can you get married?" and "Hey, can you show us some kung fu?" The kids kept pestering him to demonstrate his kung fu skills. Finally, the teacher calmed them down, saying they could do all that during playtime. During playtime, the coach informed everyone that their agility would be tested next month, and those who didn't pass wouldn't be able to move on to the next grade. Hearing this, Yu got really worried because he was overweight and even had trouble walking. The coach then had everyone run a 100-meter race. Li finished 2 laps ahead of time, while the rest of the kids were still on their first lap. Next, they were told to do push-ups, and Lee, being an expert, easily did more than 100, while the other kids couldn't even manage 2. Then he started doing one-handed push-ups, leaving everyone in awe. High jumping was a breeze for Lee, but poor Yu ended up falling flat on his face. Meanwhile, Dr. Han was being held captive by Larry, who was tormenting him with golf balls. That night, the 2 thugs saw an opportunity and broke into Lan's house. Lee spotted them and hid behind a toy to scare them, but they quickly found him and attacked. When Lan arrived, the thugs stole the panda and made their escape. Lee explained everything to Lan and Yu, but they thought he was joking. Later, we see the 2 thugs lying on the ground with golf balls stuffed in their mouths because they had mistakenly stolen a look-alike perfume instead of the actual panda keychain. Larry needed that special device to sell to a company within 3 days. Larry started getting anxious. In his frustration, he targeted the 2 thugs with a golf ball and angrily ordered them to bring back the special device as soon as possible. The next day at school, all the kids were watching a taekwondo match, while Yu and Shanshan were sitting at the back, gossiping about 2 unattractive girls. These girls were none other than the 2 thugs in disguise, who had come there with a plan. They spotted the panda keychain hanging from Lan's bag and waited for the perfect moment to steal it. At that moment, Lee challenged Fan to a match, and all the kids rushed forward to watch the exciting showdown. The thugs seized this opportunity to snatch the panda from Lan's bag, but in the process, their fake wigs fell off. Meanwhile, the match between Fan and Lee was heating up, with both of them proving to be formidable opponents. Eventually, they decided not to harm each other and called off the match. Just then, everyone turned around and recognized the thugs. The kids attacked them, but this time, the thugs managed to escape with a panda device by threatening to harm a little girl. The kids quickly went to the principal and called the police, explaining the entire situation. Lee felt responsible for what had happened, thinking that if he hadn't challenged Fan, Lan wouldn't have left her bag unattended. However, the other kids reassured him that it wasn't his fault. Finally, Larry got his hands on the device and tried to run it on a computer, but he needed a password to activate it, which he didn't know. He called in some programmers to crack the password, but even after an entire day, they made no progress. Larry's frustration reached its peak. Then, he saw a message from Lan on Dr. Han's phone, asking her father to come home for her birthday the next day. Larry, pretending to be Dr. Han, promised that he would be there. The next day, Lan and her friends were busy preparing for her birthday party. Everyone else left the house to buy gifts for Lan, leaving her alone. Just then, she received a message from her father saying that he was outside the house. As soon as Lan stepped out, someone suddenly abducted her and forced her into a van. At the same time, Lee and his friends spotted Lan in the van and quickly started chasing it on their bicycles. Eventually, they all arrived at Dr. Han's lab, where they found Lan crying. Meanwhile, Larry and his business partner were in a heated argument because Larry was supposed to sell the special device the next day, but he still didn't have the password. Enraged, Larry put a knife to Lan's throat and demanded the password. Lan replied, "That's the password," and suddenly the program activated. Outside, the 2 original thugs were guarding the hideout. Lee and Fan launched an attack on them, taking them down in a matter of seconds. However, they soon faced Larry's man, Bradley, a formidable fighter. Despite their combined efforts, Lee and Fan struggled to defeat him. Inside the lab, just as Larry was about to seal the deal, Yu sneaked in and freed his sister and father. Together, they confronted the thugs. At the same moment, Larry grabbed the bag containing the pen drive and tried to escape, but Dr. Han, Yu, and Lan teamed up to give him a solid beating. Meanwhile, Lee rejoined Fan in battling Bradley, and together, they finally managed to defeat him. Eventually, the police arrived and arrested all the thugs. Later, the principal awarded Lee and Yu medals for their bravery. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.